Occasional political disagreements between me and my husband were part of our relationship, but I believed in addressing them privately. I found our discussions more productive when we could have a quiet dialogue at home, out of the public eye. Before discussing the border crisis with him, I thoroughly educated myself on the situation. I discovered that in April, Attorney General Jeff Sessions had announced a zero-tolerance policy for those attempting to enter the U.S. illegally. This meant that individuals who would have previously been processed and released were now facing criminal charges. As a result, families seeking asylum at legal ports of entry were now being separated under these new rules. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess Cannell, and if you're new, then welcome. I would really like to earn your subscription today. We are working our way through Melania Trump's book. We probably have 2 or 3 episodes left. Today we are going to be getting into some of her global travels and some moments of crisis that sometimes brought controversy. So before we get into that, I just want to highlight what's coming next week. So as we get into the JFK anniversary, is that what we call it when it's a death? I don't know. The assassination anniversary. It's the 61st year. And I have some books. This one is just photos of them in Cape Cod. I have some magazines that have to do with the motorcade. I have one that's going to be kind of a surprise Life magazine. And then I have this one that looks at the JFK movie that was made in the 90s. So we're going to look at various aspects of the JFK assassination and remember it together. One of the magazines that we are going to look at is the Life magazine that shared those Zapruder film images. So it is the very first Life magazine after JFK was shot. And so we're going to look at that together. So it will be all JFK all the time. I do love JFK assassination related topics. So that will be a fun letting off of steam for me, but also hopefully a wonderful intake of various sources of information, some lighthearted like the family pictures, some less emotional like the review of the movie and what people were looking to that movie to accomplish at the time that it was made. And then a few contemporaneous magazines for us to look at. So I hope that's interesting to you. Please join me for those various episodes next week, and let's go ahead and get into Melania. We are partway through chapter 14. Toward the end of our first year in the White House, Donald and I embarked on our first official trip to Asia. South Korea, Japan, and China were on the list that they would visit. Upon arriving in China, we participated in a beautiful welcome ceremony at the airport, followed by a welcome tea and a couple's dinner at the Forbidden City with President Xi and Madame Peng. We were fortunate, too, to have a private tour of the Forbidden City, during which we were able to go behind the scenes and see all the work that went into preserving such an important historical treasure. On the second day, Madame Peng and I toured the Bangchang Primary School, where we've participated in various classes, including Peking opera, astronomy, fashion and design, calligraphy, cooking, and Chinese architecture. I was impressed by what I saw, especially the teaching of traditional crafts and skills. I also noticed that none of the children were on their phones. They were focused on their studies instead, disciplined and very respectful. I was glad to have the opportunity to visit a Chinese school. Of course, I also understood that life in China differs from that in the United States. It is stricter and more closely monitored by the state. There is less freedom. But the people I met there were hardworking and courteous, and they clearly took great pride in their work. It was a visit I will never forget. I've always been driven to help those in need, and I felt a strong sense of duty to use my platform as First Lady for good. With those thoughts in mind, I completed the necessary preparations for my first solo foreign trip as First Lady. I made the decision to elevate my Be Best initiative to a global platform. The mission was clear: to uplift and empower women and children, I planned to visit Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, and Egypt over a 5-day period. I was eager to contribute, learn, and explore in any way possible. My trip in October 2018 began with a visit that I felt profoundly marked our complicated history with the African continent. The door of no return in Ghana is an ominous landmark, the final threshold for enslaved individuals before their forced journey across the ocean. Did you guys know that there was a door? I did not know that before reading this, that there's a door that leads toward the shoreline. I had studied history and knew the grim facts, but I wanted to witness it for myself. Upon arriving at Cape Coast Castle, one of the many European-built trading posts used during the Atlantic slave trade, I laid a wreath and reflected on lives irrevocably altered by this brutal chapter in human history. It's impossible not to be deeply moved by such a place. This reminds me of visiting a Holocaust camp, or I've not visited those, but I have visited Holocaust museums. And it's always such a sobering day to contemplate the lives lost. Like she said, the lives irrevocably changed, the families ripped apart, the way that history stands in a tragic memorial in a place like this. My visit to the Greater Accra Regional Hospital was especially rewarding. I had the opportunity to witness the care and treatment of newborns at the Old Child Welfare Clinic. Babies were weighed, received vitamins, and other services. I had the pleasure of cradling precious little ones in my arms and engaging in conversations with their mothers. It was an honor to tour the private neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU, in the hospital's new section, alongside First Lady Rebecca Akufo-Addo and the hospital's medical director. From Ghana, we flew to Malawi, where we visited the Chapala Primary School in Lilongwe. 80 educators taught nearly 8,500 students in only 20 classrooms. Yet the students, seated in the hot sunshine, clad in regal blue and brown uniforms, were enthusiastic and eager to learn. Their radiant smiles and thirst for knowledge were truly a sight to behold. I sat in a reading session with the group of students in the hot sun. The children sat on the ground, cross-legged, holding their books and echoing the teacher's words. Their positive spirit brought a smile to my face, but the poor condition of their school weighed heavily on my heart. The young child seated beside me was eagerly absorbing every word. Clearly, he had a strong desire to learn. Before departing, I distributed soccer balls, school supplies, and Be Best tote bags stuffed with books. I was elated to be present when the U.S. ambassador announced a donation of 1.4 million books. Be Best tote bags might sound like nothing. Though a modest gesture, it was a testament to our promise to make a difference. As my trip in Africa continued, my appreciation for the beautiful continent grew stronger. I was touched by the kindness and resilience of the people I met, particularly in Kenya, when I met the children at the Nest Children's Home. Engaging with the children at the orphanage proved to be a truly fulfilling and emotional experience, both for me and my team. Now she takes us into a different trip. We know that we are free because you are brave. And I speak on behalf of my husband when I tell you we are forever grateful for your service. I was addressing an audience of servicemen and women at Joint Base Langley Eustis in Virginia. It was December 2018. Supporting our military is a fundamental belief of mine. I come from an area of the world that has experienced violence. Freedom must never be taken for granted. With Christmas approaching, I showed my support by visiting the base to engage with the military personnel directly and to convey to them the depth of appreciation and support that my husband and I had for them. We know that you often endure time apart. Frequent moves and deployments can be hard, and that kind of lifestyle requires its own kind of incredible courage. Please know that your sacrifices do not go unnoticed or unappreciated. After speaking to the brave soldiers, I boarded a V-22 Osprey aircraft for a flight over the Atlantic to the USS George H.W. Bush, a colossal 6.2 billion U.S. Navy aircraft carrier spanning 1,000 feet. I'll just say, you guys know, if you've been watching, that I just got back from spending time with my Marine out in California, but the very first thing we did when we went to California was to get on board the USS Midway, which is now a retired aircraft carrier. And so we got to tour this, so her interactions feel particularly familiar and like something I can imagine to me, because I actually just went on my first aircraft carrier. They are huge. She says, initially all I could see was the ocean stretched out endlessly in all directions, but as we neared the ship, it gradually grew until its true magnitude became apparent. What had seemed small on the horizon was now a feat of naval engineering looming before us. It resembled a bustling city afloat in the middle of the ocean, throbbing with activity, an awe-inspiring sight. I embarked on a comprehensive ship tour and was privileged to meet the crew. Standing on the observation booth in the brisk, cold wind, I observed as planes executed their daring takeoffs, maneuvers, and landings, a scene reminiscent of something from Top Gun. The deafening roar of the engines only added to the thrilling atmosphere. I commended the courageous pilots for their exceptional skills. Yet the most profound impact on me came from interacting with the young sailors and crew members. As I mentioned above, these men and women endure months away from their families, living aboard ship in a uniquely challenging lifestyle. It was an honor to spend time with them. One of the things that stood out to me in the visit was when we got to the crew rooms where all the bunks were there, and my son described the way that 6 young men would all get, they would have 3 beds here and 3 beds here, and there was literally a floor space like this between them, where just right there 6 men had to get ready for the day. And considering that, the things that our servicemen and women go through really is shocking. I know my son only did it for a month when he was deployed, but others live that way for a very long time. My grandfather was one. I wonder if you know of anyone in the service who has lived aboard one of these ships, and just contemplating their lifestyle really is something that we can appreciate. And I soon found myself presented with a new opportunity. We were heading to Iraq. The mission was conducted discreetly, with the flight under the cover of darkness. The purpose was to visit the soldiers and generals on the front lines, to wish them a Merry Christmas. The goal was secrecy, and to return to Washington, D.C. before any information leaked. It was Donald's idea initially, but he asked me to join. In the past, it was customary for the president to go alone to visit troops in a war zone without the company of the First Lady. But Donald wanted me with him, and I was honored to go. Naturally, I was a little apprehensive. While the risks were minimized with the best protection available, my thoughts inevitably turned to my loved ones and the what-ifs, which of course it would. You'd have to prepare your heart for those what-ifs and think, which sacrifices would be worth that. Nevertheless, as First Lady, I was determined to visit our troops in the field. They were the ones putting themselves in harm's way for our safety back home. Nearly 15 years after the post-9/11 deployment to Iraq, ordered by George W. Bush, the U.S. still maintained a presence of over 5,000 service members in the region. In light of recent developments, Donald had made the decision to withdraw 2,000 American troops from Syria. As a show of support and gratitude, visiting those who were still stationed abroad during the holiday season was a priority. It was a small gesture to show our appreciation for their service. Except for my parents and Barron, very few people were informed. To ensure security, much of the preparation was executed at the last minute. We left the White House in the evening through the underground garage, bypassing our usual vehicle to avoid any indication that the president was on the move. Air Force One, instead of being on the tarmac at Andrews, was hidden in the hangar. We boarded there for the 11-hour overnight flight. We landed at Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq in complete darkness. The runways were entirely unlit, relying on the pilots' sophisticated equipment and their decades of combined experience to get us onto the ground safely. That would be very impressive. A little bit scary. I vividly remember the darkness and the pervasive dust. It was Iraq, the desert, dry and rugged. And it was Christmas. The element of surprise was our greatest ally as we arrived at the base. After meeting with the generals in a makeshift building, we entered the mess hall where the soldiers were gathered for their Christmas dinner, and anticipation filled the air. The troops, the very reason for our presence, soon recognized us and realized the special moment unfolding before them. Initial surprise gave way to whoops and cheers, followed by jubilant applause. Their warm welcome, patriotism, and bravery were deeply stirring. Many took selfies. The soldiers' joy radiated from their beaming faces. Next, we moved to a hangar to formally greet them all. Before introducing the president, I expressed how honored I was to be there. Thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for keeping us safe and free. I'm very proud of you, and on behalf of our nation, I'm wishing you a Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year. Thank you again. Donald expressed his thoughts sincerely and genuinely, and then concluding his speech, Donald reiterated a point that is very important to him. America is a peace-loving nation, but rest assured, if we are forced to fight, we will engage the enemy with overwhelming force like never before, like nobody has ever seen before. There is no military more capable, more lethal, more fearless, and more skilled than the United States Armed Forces. Nobody's even close. That's sort of a Trumpism, isn't it? But I will say, these are the exact sentiments that I just heard a general express to our Marines at a Marine ball just 4 days ago. Our faith and confidence in you is absolute and total. You are the sentinels who watch over our nation. You are the warriors who defend our freedom. You are the patriots who ensure the flame of liberty burns forever bright. That's who you are. May God bless you, protect you, and keep you safe. We love you, we support you, we salute you, and together we pray for justice, goodness, and peace on earth. That would be a fantastic thing as a serviceman or woman to receive from your commander-in-chief, the encouragement that we're going to bring overwhelming force if someone dares threaten security and peace. But more than anything else, we trust you. You're doing a great job. You're well trained. You're in the right spot. You're who we believe in. You're a sentinel. You're a watchman on the gate, and we trust you. And more than anything, we pray for peace. I think those are really good sentiments and really good principles for all of us when we engage with military issues. Due to security concerns, our time on the ground was limited to just a few hours before we had to depart. Shortly after landing, we were back on Air Force One, but there was one more stop. At 2 a.m., we landed at Ramstein Air Base in Germany to refuel. There were troops there too. So many men and women spending the holidays away from their families. This reception was just as warm as it had been in Iraq. The soldiers were elated to see us and lined up for pictures in the early hours of Christmas morning. But it was Donald and I who felt truly honored. Less than 24 hours had passed since we had left Washington. So they were able to pull off that trip in complete secrecy. That is fantastic. I think something like that is a really wonderful use of diversion and, cloak and dagger, stealing off in the dark. Like, it's a really special thing to use secrecy for this sort of purpose. In May 2019, we traveled to Japan for our second official visit. The U.S. and Japan enjoy close diplomatic ties, and so Donald had significant business to discuss with Prime Minister Abe. Additionally, he was to have the honor of being the first foreign leader to meet the new emperor, Naruhito, who had acceded to the throne earlier that month. As First Lady, you meet many spouses and partners of foreign heads of state, but you form closer relationships with some of them than with others. Aki had an intriguing background. She had been a radio DJ. This is the First Lady of Japan. She had been a radio DJ, run an organic bar in Tokyo, and attended a Catholic school, which is relatively rare in Japan. I formed a genuine connection with her, and this trip reaffirmed that link. The four of us had the privilege of attending the Grand Sumo tournament with ringside seats. At the end of a match, Donald was invited into the ring. Wearing traditional ceremonial slippers, he made his way onto the dirt and presented the champion wrestler with a giant trophy. That sounds really fun. It was a memorable evening that encapsulated the warmth and hospitality of our hosts. I was deeply shocked and saddened to hear of Mr. Abe's assassination in 2022. He was a remarkable leader, and the connection between him and Donald was genuine. The world would undoubtedly be a better place if more countries could foster relationships like this. Shortly after our return from Japan, we were off again to visit Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. We had met a year earlier over tea at Windsor Castle. Her Majesty had graciously poured us tea and offered scones with jam, while her cherished corgis lounged at her feet. We were delighted to have the opportunity to see her again. The afternoon state visit at Buckingham Palace was truly unforgettable. Donald and I landed in Marine One on the perfectly manicured grounds and were greeted by Prince Charles and his wife, Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, who escorted us to the entrance where Her Majesty the Queen awaited. Inside the resplendent palace, Her Majesty guided us through the royal collection, showcasing artifacts of profound significance to America. The evening state banquet was a formal and elegant affair. I was seated next to Prince Charles, and it was an absolute pleasure to reconnect with him. Our paths had crossed many years ago in New York City. This time we engaged in an interesting conversation about his deep-rooted commitment to environmental conservation. That is what he's known for. Among the cherished gifts I received from Queen Elizabeth I is particularly memorable to me, a specially commissioned silver box with an enamel lid that features images of the rose, thistle, and shamrock, echoing the intricate ceiling motifs of Buckingham Palace's music room. Am I right in thinking that the rose, thistle, and shamrock are like the three flowers that symbolize the UK? Is that right for, I believe, England, Wales, and Scotland? Is that right? Y'all fill me in. I can't quite remember. I thought the shamrock had to do with Ireland, but maybe that's right. I don't know. Fill me in. Let me know in the comments if I've got that right. I feel like those three, I've heard them describing something. Maybe it's the British Isles. You'll tell me, I'm sure. Our visit culminated with a moving ceremony commemorating the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy, a tribute to the heroic sacrifices of British and American soldiers in the fight against the evil of the Nazis. As we bid farewell to Her Majesty, we extended a cordial invitation for her return visit to the U.S. She expressed gratitude with a warm smile. Sadly, she wasn't able to visit us again before her death in 2022, but our friendship with the royal family continues, and we exchange letters with King Charles to this day. I think it's interesting, she, when she wrote this, obviously didn't know that the election was going to go this way, but I think it's interesting that they have maintained some of these relationships. I mean, and of course they have, but you can just imagine as world leaders come and go, that those, particularly like the royal family, who have a steady, ongoing, decades-long post that they're filling, probably can't keep up with everyone. So it's interesting to learn about that. Moments of crisis, chapter 15. The First Lady's schedule is planned weeks, sometimes months in advance. It's a never-ending succession of events, speeches, rallies, trips, meetings, state dinners, visits, luncheons, etc. There's always a commitment to fulfill and a place to be. However, we also must have readiness for unpredictable occurrences, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, tragedies that necessitate compassion and immediate action. She talks about Hurricane Harvey. She reminds us that it happened on August 25th, 2017 in the Gulf, devastating tens of thousands of lives. My husband and I recognized the urgency. 4 days later, we were on our way to Texas on Air Force One, ready to offer support and assistance. On the ground, we met with local disaster relief teams and spoke with people whose lives had been upended by the storm. We encountered people who had lost their homes, their belongings, and in some heartbreaking instances, their loved ones. It was a deeply emotional experience for both of us. We conferred with governors and mayors and collaborated closely with FEMA to guarantee that the affected communities received essential supplies, food, shelter, and water. Amid the chaos, one encounter stands out starkly. A 35-year-old woman who had lost her home and everything she owned. I gave her a hug as we chatted. She had experienced such immense loss and yet radiated resilience and hope. She shared how neighbors had come together, offering each other comfort and support. Her story was a poignant reminder of the strength and solidarity that can emerge from the depths of tragedy. My desire to help children, a deeply personal one I had made public through Be Best, would be tested 2 months after its launch. This whole section is really fascinating, so I hope you'll lean in and listen to not just the story itself, but the implications throughout. I think it's really an interesting look at how she and Donald interact and the ways that she was not going to be steamrolled by anybody. Not him, not policies, not long-standing traditions, and also not the media. So let's listen. Recent reports of families being separated at the U.S. southern border had sparked widespread concern and condemnation. The children were apparently being held in overcrowded detention centers in absolute squalor. This raised serious questions about their health and well-being. I felt strongly that the situation demanded urgent attention and action to ensure the protection and reunification of these families. My husband's hardline stance on immigration was well known. While I understood the importance of secure borders, I was blindsided by the reports in the media regarding the administration's immigration policies, particularly the separation of families and detention of children. I was never briefed. I had been completely unaware of this policy. As the First Lady, I felt it was imperative to get to the bottom of these allegations and understand the actions being taken by the White House. I contacted my Chief of Staff to gather information. It was critical to address this situation with speed, transparency, and compassion, ensuring that the policies reflected our values as a nation. Occasional political disagreements between me and my husband were part of our relationship, but I believed in addressing them privately rather than publicly challenging him. I found our discussions more productive when we could have a quiet dialogue at home, out of the public eye. Before discussing the border crisis with him, I thoroughly educated myself on the situation. I discovered that in April, Attorney General Jeff Sessions had announced a zero-tolerance policy for those attempting to enter the U.S. illegally. This meant that individuals who would have previously been processed and released were now facing criminal charges and detention. As a result, families seeking asylum at legal ports of entry were now being separated under these new rules. I am sympathetic to all who wish to find a better life in this country. As an immigrant myself, I intimately understand the necessary, if arduous, process of legally becoming an American. While I support strong borders, what was going on at the border was simply unacceptable and went against everything I believe in. I immediately addressed my deep concerns with Donald regarding the family separations, emphasizing the trauma it was causing these families. As a mother, I stressed, the government should not be taking children away from their parents. I communicated with clarity during that conversation. This has to stop. Donald assured me that he would investigate the issue, and on June 20th, he announced the end of the family separation policy. An executive order was signed that afternoon, stating it was now the policy of this administration to maintain family unity. You know, we've talked about how she was not someone to strong-arm her agenda into this administration, but it is interesting to get this behind-the-scenes look at the way that her values and her sense of what was right, what was beautiful and good, and what was completely wrong and ugly ought to be a guiding principle for those who are in governance. And it's interesting to see the way that she brought her concerns, and he listened. This new policy was an important step, but I also needed to witness the situation at the border firsthand. My presence could help maintain pressure on officials to reunite families as quickly as possible. After discussing it with my husband, I received his support to go. I wanted to show the American people how deeply we cared about this issue and how dedicated we were to finding a solution. A plan was quickly put together for my trip to Texas the following day. What truly mattered were the children at the border. The following morning, on June 21st, I traveled to McAllen, Texas. It was one of the epicenters of the border crisis. We visited the New Hope Children's Center, one of many youth detention centers situated along the border in Texas. It was well maintained, peaceful, and staffed by dedicated professionals. I experienced a brief glimmer of hope during this visit. While most of the young people were teenagers who had arrived in the U.S. unaccompanied, there were still 6 children who had been separated from their families. While interacting with the children, I asked about their well-being and learned about their experiences. Many of these children had been victims of exploitation by criminal organizations that used the children as drug mules. It quickly became evident to me that the root cause of their separation from their families was not the government, but rather the dangerous influence of criminal cartels in their home countries. These children were innocent, frightened, and in need of reassurance. I sought to offer comfort and encouragement, promising that they would be looked after and protected. I had the opportunity to meet with the teachers, doctors, and staff there, and I expressed my willingness to learn and assist in any way. Even with the best efforts of the staff and well-maintained facilities, I knew that nothing could replace the love and care of a family. Admittedly, there is a long, challenging road ahead, but I felt reassured that we were on the right path. When I was initially preparing for my trip to the border, I was overcome with a sense of frustration toward the media's relentless spread of falsehoods and negativity. Their skewed narratives always seemed to divert attention away from the most important issues. Social media allows these false narratives to snowball. I was determined, however, not to let the media's false narratives affect my mission. To make the point that the criticism from the media would never stop me from doing what I feel is right, I wore a particular jacket, a jacket that quickly became famous. The back of the jacket displayed a discreet yet impactful message. I really don't care. Do you? It's a message for the media, I told my press secretary, to let them know I was unconcerned with their opinions of me. She told me I couldn't say that. Why not? It is the truth, I told her. I disagreed with her insistence that I couldn't say that. Ignoring my comments, she told a CNN reporter that she was friendly with that it was simply a jacket, a fashion choice with no underlying message. I want to clarify that I never instructed her to provide misinformation. The media claimed the jacket meant that I did not care about the children or the border, which was clearly not true. I intentionally did not wear it during my visit to Texas and only put it on upon my return to D.C. Unfortunately, the media's distorted reporting on the jacket overshadowed the importance of the trip, the children, the border, and the policy change. It was just another example of the media's irresponsible behavior. Well, yes, I can see her point of view for sure. I think the media does decide what they will and won't focus on. And, that's tragic that they overshadowed her emphasis to get to their agenda of talking about the jacket. Well, you guys let me know what you noticed, the support for the military, their relationships with various foreign leaders. I loved the sneaking in for Christmas and going to encourage young men and women overseas. And then this jacket, the I don't really care, do you jacket, that kind of made headlines and was one of those things where, again, I think we see like this not speaking English as the first language probably contributed to some, where she thought she was communicating something very clear. And I don't think it was clear to those who were looking on. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to discussing these things with you, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.